The team will then give a bit of background on the Section 17A review and the different strokes that were considered. Painful this, but we remember we are an open session and there will be a confidential item later. Yeah, no worries, yes. Nobody, we won't get drowned in this issue. Any questions that require responses that could breach commercial sensitivity will be deferred and discussed later. So I'm going to have a little corridor with Phil, who will flounder about for a bit, and then we'll dive in with the PSA after.
I'm bereft of any witticism. Look, councillors, I wanted to introduce this item myself to sort of frame it, and therefore am going to speak before staff present on this. We're also keen that you hear from the PSA directly about this matter, and that last item finished slightly quicker than anticipated, so they are, as we speak, walking between Albert Street and this building, so I will fill in the time nicely until they get here. But the courtesy has been extended to the PSA to have public input with you, and that's as it should be. Council has a formal partnership with the Public Service Association, and it's important that that's respected. In speaking to this, I'm also mindful that we employ a large number of people in this business, some of whom, if not watching online right now, will be digesting the content of the discussion when they get off work later in the afternoon or this evening. So it's important just to pause and say, in view of that fact, that this is not a question of not valuing the work that those staff do, or the importance of the activity, the pools and leisure activity. I'm frankly proud of the work they do, and they are likewise in the services that are delivered. There are 8 million plus visits to those facilities in the course of a year, and so the impact on community, the importance of this service to a large number of people. I think I'm right in saying something in excess of 400,000 regular users, 8 million plus visits a year is noted. I'll talk to the Section 17A process, sorry for the jargon there, and the substantive matter shortly, but I also wanted to just be really clear, and I know that this is clear to you, but occasionally a bit of the detail gets lost in the narrative around a subject like this. So it's important just to say from the outset that this is not a debate about whether there will be ongoing pool and leisure services in Tamaki Makaureo. That, were it on the table, would have been a question for the long-term plan. It's not. This is simply a question, this is a question of how they're delivered. It's also not about, I suppose, service levels, opening hours, any of those things, or the cost of access to those facilities, the pricing arrangements and so on. Those are preserved as the decision-making territory of our local boards and to yourselves. So, they're not on the table. In other words, this is about the model for delivery. Even the question of procurement and who we contract with is a separate matter to what's on the table today. To the extent that there is an interest in some aspects of that, that's properly a discussion for the confidential part of the agenda, as is questions about the cost aspect, because that goes to the offers on the table, if you like, around alternate delivery approaches. That's for the confidential part of the agenda. It's also, and I'm sorry for the long preliminary here, but it's also important everyone understands that we're navigating a slightly difficult path here, and as we've discussed in a different forum, I'm keen that you have the opportunity to give direction to me and the organisation around this delivery question, but we need to stop short of being too, if you like, prescriptive here. As the employer in this space, I have a legal and a moral obligation to consult with the staff who are potentially affected and with the union. So that's why recommendations today are framed the way they are, because after you give us an indication of what direction you want to head in good conscience, in good faith, I need to engage with the staff and fulfil those other obligations. Turning to the background and the recommendations. So important to note that Section 17A reviews are a statutory requirement. They cause us in simple terms to ask the question about whether we are doing delivery in the most appropriate way, in the optimal way, if you like. In this case, this was triggered by the fact of some existing contracts coming up for renewal, and that's one of the trigger points that's referenced in the Local Government Act requirement for Section 17A reviews. Slightly horrifyingly, I can tell you that this particular process started in 2021, so it predates me and it predates some of you in terms of possibly your awareness of that process, and that it ultimately requires to come back to you for reporting. The questions around delivery, yes, they significantly relate to cost and the value for money question in terms of whether doing things in-house or doing things by contract is the best way. But there's certainly not the only, that's certainly not the only criterion. There are questions, quite rightly, in terms of service quality, whether, given these things are significantly rates funded, whether the attribution appropriately comes back to council for that investment. Okay, that's the brand question that some of you have mentioned with outsourced models. Sustainability, including sustainability in terms of market dynamics, and of course track record in terms of delivery. So this review that started in 2021 has considered all of those things, and while there are, I won't say will be, because I know very well that there are different views around the table on this subject. It has been the professional responsibility of those staff who worked on the review to put in front of you the fact that there is scope for saving money in relation to the delivery of pools and leisure services. That's fundamentally the conclusion of the Pools and Leisure Review. So it's the responsible thing for staff to have put that in front of you and to make a recommendation accordingly. The final thing I'll say, however, is that if, on balance, you want to indicate a preference for continuing council's direct involvement in delivery, then that certainly doesn't faze me, and it's certainly something that we will take in good faith and we will work on in the organisation. And I dare say you might hear from the PSA that they are up for that challenge as well, because it is nevertheless a responsibility of the organisation in that circumstance, if that's where you choose to go this afternoon, that we work this as hard as we can to get some of the savings, some of the efficiencies that have been indicated through the review. And to some degree at least close the gap here in terms of those different cost structures that are have been indicated through the review. So I sort of signal in advance, you know, a willingness to do that. We can certainly explore running leisure more efficiently. I believe, and we don't need to get into this today, it's not the point of the exercise, but I do think there are opportunities in terms of the way that we frame it. You know, I'm familiar from previous experience with models such as a standalone business unit for this activity and ways of unburdening it with some of the overhead costs that activities in the organisation have to bear, and they do account for some of the story in terms of the different cost structures here. So, look, Your Worship, I'll leave it there. It's very timely that Martin and Sarah and Gabriel are here. Probably, hopefully, not too puffed from a quick walk across the square. And as I say, I'd like you to hear from the PSA in this regard.
Okay, let's dive in with the PSA. I enjoyed meeting with your counterparts on Tuesday, so come forward, please. In theory, you've got 5 minutes, but if it's still interesting after that, we might let it run.
Martin, please take a moment to introduce yourself more formally.
All right. Well, ite whānau, kia ora koutou, ko Martin Graham tōku ingoa. My name is Martin Graham. I'm one of your PSA full-time delegates at Auckland Council, and I've been an employee council for over 10 years, starting in customer services and through blood, sweat and tears, crawling my way up the ranks to sit in the current position I have. So, kia ora. I'll pass it to my colleagues. Yep.
Kia ora. My name is Gabi. I'm a fitness consultant at Stanmore Bay Pools and Leisure, and I'm also a PSA delegate. I've been with the council almost 10 years as well.
And kia ora everyone, I'm Sarah Stone and I'm an organiser at the PSA.
So firstly, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak to you all today. It's really important that you hear from not just myself, but actually from a real living employee of one of your pools and leisure centres up in Stanmore Bay. I also want to acknowledge there will be quite a few people watching online. A lot of them will be staff members from our leisure centres across the Motu, from Albany to West Wave to Manuera to Moana Nui Kiwa. So when we went out to our staff and members over the last week, they were very, very interested in this matter. So I just thought I'd acknowledge them and say ngā mihi to them. So with 5 minutes, we're going to be very brief, but our asks are up on screen for everyone to see. You would have also potentially received a copy from myself this morning. We are asking the governing body to decisively and determinedly say no to any proposal that comes before you that looks at privatising, and yes, it is privatising, any or all of the operations that are currently council managed. So that's the 22 sites that are currently under council management. Now, I want to be crystal clear about this next point. It is not lost on me, it is not lost on any of your staff at the leisure centres or the PSA that there are some financial challenges within the Pools and Leisure Service, right? But the great thing about the union here at Auckland Council is we operate in a partnership model. We're very highly integrated at every level of the business, and we absolutely see the strains and the challenges that it takes to run a city like Auckland. The point I've made on that slide is if the decision is to vote no against any sort of outsourcing or privatisation, then we absolutely want to do that active, open engagement with the union and your frontline staff to investigate, collaborate, co-design those opportunities for savings and operational improvements. I mentioned earlier that over the last week we had the opportunity to do some roundtables with staff from various sites. You would be absolutely blown away by the creative thinking, the ideas, the problem solving from these very people. So it's really important that going forward, that in a situation where there's no to the proposal, that we actually sit down with staff and actually get their ideas, because don't underestimate our people. Now, you would have seen quite a lot of emails and stuff in the media about why we're calling this privatisation. It is privatisation. Let's not beat around the bush. Okay, it meets the dictionary definition. It's not, we're not potentially leasing these sites to central government or another district council. These are private companies. And you might know some of these companies if you did a Google search: Belgravia, YMCA, CLM, and particularly for Belgravia, they have an appalling record. They have an appalling record in Australia and here in New Zealand, right? The first result when you type in Belgravia into the news is investigation for assault and harassment and bullying at their Canberra sites. So this is something to really bear in mind when you make your decision later today. I think fundamentally it's understanding that Auckland Council as a territorial authority and the private market are two distinct sectors. They do not have the same interests or incentives. We tend to be far more strategic. That's a really good thing for management of pools and leisure sites. In 2013, Sports NZ did a review of facility management and they identified that local government is really effective in driving strategic community outcomes compared to the private sector. If you just want profit, that's the private. But we're a bit more than that, right? And it's not to paint a picture of disaster and catastrophe. Don't believe the hype about our sites. The numbers are going up. We're getting more customers through the door. We're running more programs. So any money that we are making has the opportunity to be reinvested back into our organisation, back into the communities, back into our people. I think I need to be called out a little bit in terms of how the recommendation has been presented to the governing body. It's been a bugbear for some time now as someone who's led the PSA's response through annual budgets, long-term plans, etc., how some recommendations are framed and presented to you as decision makers. Unfortunately, they tend to be kind of put as a package and they tend to kind of overestimate the cost and underestimate the benefits of any option that would see in-housing of strategically important services. I think for us, it's about saying the decision around KPIs, decision around living wage, decision around what happens to the contracts for the 19 other sites that are up for renewal can absolutely and separately be decided without then also having to vote to outsource. So it's something to watch out for. And I'm pleased to see that a number of the governing body picked that up during the workshop last week. Now, unfortunately, we won't be part of the commercially sensitive section of your decision making today. I'm not sure why, because we do have a good sense of what the numbers are. We do have a lot of members right throughout the organisation who are very angry and upset about this proposal, and they are talking to us through protected non-disclosure. But in any case, I would certainly ask the governing body to consider these questions and really point to some of the facts that will come out under an outsourcing model. For example, what are the strategic and opportunity costs for council if everything's outsourced? What are we losing? Yep, you might get some savings out of it, but that makes it a lot more difficult to drive any athletic, aquatic, recreation targets that we want for our communities. It's not lost on me that it's currently the Olympics And if we want to support our current and future Olympians, we need to retain that level of control and authority over our pools and leisure sites. The other thing to call out is the costs that can arise out of legal disputes and contract management. It is not a cost-neutral exercise. There are potential risks for the savings to blow up in smoke because we spend most of our time in the High Court arguing over terminologies, definitions of the contracts that we would have for these companies. I should know, I've been bargaining quite a few contracts in my time, and there's no way you can specify every little detail or spans of control, and inevitably these things can end in disaster and us up in the court when we could be actually spending our time reinvesting, directing, supporting our staff across the leisure centres delivering for the community. I think the final point I'd conclude really is this, it strikes me that this is an opportunity to really revisit the importance of our pools and leisure centres. And I'm impressed by the quality of engagement that the public has in this matter. You would see obviously in social media and the RNZ interview last night that the public have a very strong stance against privatisation. It's not particularly popular, particularly with something as important as our pools and leisure sites, right? So while PSA isn't necessarily against public consultation, I think, you know, that would be better than anything. The reality is that we need that leadership from today to be shown by our governing body to decisively say no, we're not going to privatise, we're not going to outsource, and let's get on with the good work of talking to our staff, doing exactly what the PSA did in 3 days, finding out more information, more data, more solutions to operational and cost-saving options than it took value for money for 3 years. So that's what I'm asking here today, that's what Gabby's here, that's what Sarah's here for, and all our members, is to say vote no and work with us, work with the staff to make our sites humming and working for our Auckland communities. Kia ora.
Thank you for that. I've got 4 people who would like to ask you questions. Councillor Sayers first.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Martin. I've really, took on board about your willingness to work cooperatively to try and find some solutions, and the fact that our staff have problems solving skills out there, and you've already, in a short time, seen it. You know they're sitting there; they just haven't been asked, right? So, appreciate that. So my question probably goes around your request seems to be around the ones that are currently run by the council, right? To say no to those, but there are about 19 that are currently not council run, so they're not kind of within scope of your concerns or trying to tap into the staff that work at those pool and leisure centres as well, to come up with any ideas from them. Are they, just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So as a union, we can only talk to our PSA members. So we have members at all the council sites, not in the private sector. So it's not that we can't try to talk to them, it's just very difficult. Particularly in the Belgravia sites, their relationship with unions and worker advocates in Australia is pretty poor, and I'm not led to believe that would be any different here in New Zealand.
Could the management team within Auckland Council talk to those other ones that aren't part of the PSA equation?
You could talk to them, but what the report shows is that those outsourced organisations aren't doing as well as the council organisations. So if you want to have a look for ideas, I mean, it's been a confusing time for staff when we've gone out to talk to them, to council staff, because they've been told that they're at the 96% target of the revenue target. So staff in the council leisure centres are going, what do you mean? We've just literally last week been told we're at this 96% mark. If you need to increase that revenue target, then albeit. But the outsourced organisations don't have the same foot traffic, they're not doing as well. Basically, they're not doing the job to the same standard.
Yeah, thank you for that. And in terms of the timelines, in terms of the amount of work and effort in the meetings that might need to take place to come up with reaching whatever these targets are, both, sounds like financial ones and perhaps performance objective ones, can that be done within the next annual plan timeline? Can it be done before, kind of this time next year? How quickly are we talking? Have you got any feel for how long this might take to try and achieve what you've suggested?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It's an interesting one because, in theory, I'd love to get onto this straight away. However, we're going to need a lot of support from our corporate support services, HR, and obviously management as well. And I can't speak to their capacity, but I do know it's pretty tight at the moment. In terms of the PSA side things, believe it or not, we're actually going to bargaining for the council side and the CCOs later this year, so a lot of our availability is tied up with that. But look, in principle, if we could get onto it ASAP, the members are up for it, we're up for it. I think just capacity and availability is going to be the challenge.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Councillor Foley, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, team, for your presentation and your strong voice today. I've got a couple of questions. First off, you described it as a partnership between Auckland Council and the PSA. For this particular item and issue, can you describe what that partnership has looked like? And do you think that you and the workers have been well consulted in that partnership? And then I've got a couple of follow-ons. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. In March, we were contacted by the former General Manager, Dave Stewart, and Garth Dawson, and they reached out to us to let us know, probably really the first time in an official sense, that this process was happening. They showed us some information, what the value for money team were deciding, the kind of 20-odd options that they looked at. And the purpose of that meeting really was from kind of from Dave's perspective, was how to get the union involved as much as possible. So it was a very positive meeting. We ended up coming away from that session with a terms of engagement document. And it talked to a few things around how we might have people like Gabby and other workplace representatives from the pools and leisure space being involved in kind of some of that kind of deep decision making around a process like this. So things about being involved in the SteerCo, kind of getting access to the financials, and if need be, signing NDAs, non-disclosure agreements to obviously protect those commercial secrets. And in that sense, I was quite confident that regardless of what the outcome would be, we would be well informed across the information and have a good kind of debate throughout. Unfortunately, Dave left, moved on to better and brighter things overseas, and for a period of, I'll say, about a month, 2 months, it was kind of radio silence. And then we got re-engaged by a councillor again, and a lot of decisions had been made, and it became a sense of that we've made the decisions. We can't tell you half of the things that influence our decisions because they're commercially sensitive, and it's all going to be outsourcing. And to the credit of the team, we were asking all the questions, we're pushing for as much information as possible, but it was pretty clear that this was more of, we've done the work, we've made the decisions, and we'll work with you once we've outsourced, which is unfortunate. I know that's not necessarily what the staff involved wanted. It's a feature, but I don't think that counts as what happened as very thorough or robust workplace or worker engagement. One more point I should make, and this is an important one, when we spent last week reaching out to staff, it was the first time many of them had actually heard officially and concretely this process was happening. A lot of it was rumours, a lot of it was back channels. In one instance, members were hearing it from their colleagues at the YMCA Belgravia sites, So all this information was already out there, but nobody had told them. So we did the right thing. We spoke to our members, and I'm pretty proud that we were able to spin something up in such a short time frame.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll definitely, yeah, that will sit with us, I think, when we make a decision later on. My second question is around the advantage of being part of the council whānau for staff. And when you were introducing how long you've been involved in and how you've moved within the council whānau, and I thought of when I was chair of the local board, one of my local board advisors, one of the best I've had, I'd have to say, since being with council. He actually had started almost a decade previously through pools and leisure centres. He started as a student working part-time through pools and leisure in Otara and in Mangere, and had worked his way up through the council whānau and was a local board advisor and is now in a senior position with another funder. So from the PSA's point of view and from the staff point of view, what are the advantages of being part of the council whānau for staff, for our residents, for customers, for community initiatives as well, because you've talked a bit about how your staff have different ideas about community initiatives, and then also in terms of responding when we have emergencies like COVID, like the floods, etc. Kia ora.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I would say from our point of view, we are part of the community. We have pretty much our families using the services as well. We work as a family, and we have many family members working in the leisure centres as well. And we care about our community. We're passionate about the work we do, and we don't do it for the money, definitely. And I think a private company will only care about the profit. For much of whatever they want to say, it will always be profit. And our motive is different as being council. So pretty much that's the main point I wanted to make.
And to follow on from that, so there is a degree of mobility and leadership development that occurs between kind of the pools and leisure space into the wider council. One of our delegates actually this week, who's been helping a lot in this, has been given an opportunity to work in the HR unit within council. So that's an opportunity for him and his whānau that he would not otherwise have if he was working for the types of companies out in the private sector. We're a very diverse business. We have very diverse kind of interests and roles, departments, etc. And that's a strength of ours that I think would be lost, or I know would be lost, because that would be separated out in outsourcing. In terms of kind of other pros, I think the first thing is where sites are profitable, or they are kind of doing well, I mean, all that money can be just reinvested back into the centre, into the organisation, right? The moment these are outsourced, these companies will be expecting to clip the ticket, and it will be bye-bye over to Australia. And that's not necessarily a good thing when we have an opportunity to get some of these funds back into our community. Institutional knowledge is a really important one, and that's a question I've put up there. How do you measure that when you have staff like myself who have been with council going on a decade? A lot of centre managers have been around the traps for a very long time. They know their people better than anyone, right? And in a process of outsourcing, there will be, unfortunately, some roles that would be reduced. There would be a lot of redundancies potentially. And then after 12 months, the working conditions of those sites become so poor that there will be a lot of staff shortages. People just resign. So think about all the people who have been with the centres for decades, and we've just lost that. I mean, that's a cost, right? That's a significant cost to council, and we're willing to put them through a process that lets them go. So for me, those would be those two big areas, Councillor.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thanks, team. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Hills next, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Martin and team, and you'll know from that I've been working to keep our council centres in under the council on ownership. I guess my question, and you would have heard it at the workshop, but is a little bit to what Councillor Fully said around what are the benefits to the community, I guess, of the flexibility of being inside the council whānau. So we saw it with the running of the shelters during the storms, with extra work that was helped through COVID, but there was probably other examples of just the mucking in, I guess, that is enabled from having council whānau run centres.
So it kind of goes back to people. These aren't, and let me put it in these terms. There's often this tendency I've noticed in public service to talk about service as separate from people. And it's one and the same, right? There's no waste service without waste staff. There's no pools and leisure service without pools and leisure staff, right? So in the first instance, we need to be crystal clear that we're always talking about people when we're talking about functions of this organisation, right? So emergency management is people. And during the Cyclone Gabrielle and the storms of early last year, our centres quickly mobilised overnight, and it was those centre staff who turned up and held the fort alongside the specialist emergency staff, with the police, with community leaders, and they held those centres of safety, security, welfare at a time where a lot of disruption, a lot of uncertainty was occurring, and that was important for the well-being of our people to get through, and to have lifeguards and recreation advisors and team leaders get stuck in and help run something that they're not necessarily trained on doing, speaks highly of their intrinsic understanding and their capability to serve their communities.
And the last question, it does come to your first point, and I'm really quite happy to see that you pointed that out around savings. But just as I've been, the Mayor's been taking a number of our feedback, but my feedback on board, but sort of his feedback back to me is that savings portion. So if we do have some different resolutions today about holding, well, we are going to, holding the council services as council, the staff are not going to be freaked out by any resolutions that say we'll be working with PSA and staff on savings. They're not going to, it's not going to be a threat. They're going to see that as hopefully a positive.
This came from the conversations we had with members. This is what we talked to them. We were in those workshops. We'd heard some of the comments. We'd obviously been working with or talking to Value for Money, so we'd heard some of the arguments already, and we essentially just put it to the members. Unfortunately, I heard it a number of times that the market's better in getting more customers through the door. And that's a bit of a head scratcher because, one, our site's already getting increased patronage. And two, when I put that sort of argument to the members, they said, what are you talking about? We're already looking at different ways to invest and innovate and get different community engagement. The people at Moana Nui Kiwa run the Samoan language event that's super popular. I can't see groups like Belgravia or YMCA doing that, but our people can. So in terms of looking at the operational efficiencies and savings, I mean, they're doing it already. And I think it's just giving them the opportunity to get involved at a point of time which should have happened right at the start.
And just a quick comment, apologise on our behalf around the knowledge, because I did a lunchtime learning a number of months ago with staff, and there was a number of questions about this that came from staff, so I kind of made the assumption that everyone knew that, so it sounds like maybe only some did, so thank you.
Sorry. Just to add to what he was saying, we would like to be involved in any solutions, in any savings potential. We don't want to be told which are the solutions. We want to be involved because we know how our centres work much better than people in Albert Street. So we should be part of any solution from the start.
Thank you so much.
If I might just give a little bit of guidance to the room, and we totally understand the importance of talking to the track record of people in the industry, okay, in terms of your degree of confidence about who might take up contracts with council going forward. I'd just counsel everyone maybe just to leave specific references to individual companies aside. They're not here to defend themselves. It's only a question of fairness.
Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you. I don't know anything about running a pool, so to make this decision, I have to listen to the people who present. In good governance, we have to save some money going forward. But in my lifetime, I haven't seen evidence that good management is limited just to the private sector, or vice versa. Good management is just plain good management. So are you telling me that if we stuck to the status quo, the staff, the PSA members that are on your team, can see a way to deliver us some of the savings we need?
Thank you, Councillor. So I kind of bring it back to the point we've made that it's an opportunity to staff to investigate and co-design those opportunities. I don't know the books. They haven't been shown to us. Love to get stuck in and then start problem solving now. In terms of what the kind of potential savings or solutions are, I defer to the exercise of actually sitting down with the people who run these sites. Because like myself, I don't know how to run a pool, but Gabby works there, and she's the person I would look to get some sense of what we can do to drive more out of our sites, if need be. Because here's the thing, some sites are actually doing extremely well. In fact, when we talk about trying to get increased customer patronage, I mean, there's a problem with that because there's a line up the door. There's too many people. So, yeah, I suppose it's just being clear to each site what needs to be addressed, what needs to be fixed, and then actually sitting down with staff and workshopping that. And that's not a new thing. Council's done this quite a few times. Again, I speak to that partnership that's been in place since amalgamation. And it's par for the course. And so I'm willing to back that on the track record of that sort of work, then trusting the idea that somehow there's something in the market, in the private sector, that just magically is better than what we do.
Councillor Watson, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you, team. Martin, I think early on in your piece you referenced that Sport New Zealand report from a few years back that went into leisure centres. One of the key findings of that report was, of course, identifying the risks that were possible in a private management structure of leisure facilities, and particularly in a case where you have a wholesale transfer as is being proposed here. And that real risk went to the fundamental shift in the ethos of these centres, essentially from serving the public and being flexible. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of circumstances that I've just been involved with Councillor Walker at our own leisure centre, where the very sort of people that were in presenting to us for about 3 hours this morning, elderly people, people with disabilities, people who are new to the community, programs were being, purpose-built for them, and when there were strains on that, they were being accommodating. So I just would really like to just dig a little bit further on that report, which essentially, pointed out the risks that go with that kind of transfer. And when I look at the public feedback for all the centres, I see that really clear. Well, in actual fact, it's the council facilities that meet those needs and eliminate that kind of ethos risk of a change in fundamental approach.
So the point I'll make, Councillor, and thanks for the question, goes back to this idea that the private sector somehow is more productive because they've got those incentives to try and drive that performance, right? That's kind of a theory, but when you apply it to the Auckland Council context, we have something what we call kind of that high performance, high engagement model, which is that when you empower people, when you actually give them some autonomy over their roles and they're not just cogs in a machine, but you actually say, I'm interested in you as a lifeguard, what your thoughts on how to improve the place are, that drives performance. That's what drives productivity and engagement. You know, it's one of those things where if you want these sites to be really functioning well, you've got to give people power and empower them. The second thing I think calling out is I think there's a real risk, particularly with something like aquatic operations, which is naturally a high health and safety incident space anyway. Do we really want the kind of people who would work for minimum wage in these sites? Now, I know that potentially living wage would be carried over, but that's only one part of the puzzle of staff productivity. It's also the terms and conditions, it's the culture of the work site. And what we tend to see in looking at other suppliers who run pools and leisures in Australasia is staff shortages, particularly with lifeguards. We have staff disputes and employment relation issues. We have customer dissatisfaction. We have reputational damage, incidents of mismanaged marketing, unclear branding, unclear direction that hurts the experience for the customers. So that's the evidence that's out there when you look at these companies. And by no means it's not saying council somehow this magically perfect utopian group, but the key difference is we control it. We're in that position to drive and manage it directly.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. In terms of that Auckland Council esprit de corps that you identified there, it doesn't seem to have been too evident on the ground, and I know this from fact too, talking to people. People had no idea what's really been going on here until very, very late in the piece, which I find disturbing. But in terms of going forward, what's the confidence that the people around the council sites then, they're already, I think, Sarah, did you say, like reaching 96% achievements of goals or service delivery targets or whatever it is, very high percentage rates. Obviously, they're performing that to a very high standard. What's in the chance of them coming up with potential solutions to some of these financial challenges as such that have been expressed here? Because it's the same people we're dealing with. Same people are achieving these high performance delivery types and high customer relations. What's the chance then that they're going to come up with ways to alleviate the financial pinch?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it goes back to their commitment and their interest in the role. You know, when we went round to talk to staff members, you've got people who've been working there for 10 years, 20 years, even longer. I think we were up to 26 or 28. And as Gabby said, they're embedded in their communities. They want to see it thrive. They have a commitment to the role. It's not around it, having revenue goals and achieving those goals gives them a sense of pride. That's a bit different to having, performance-based pay or KPIs in other ways. They want to make their centres work. They're interested in it. They've got ideas in it. It's just that they haven't been asked.
Okay, last one, Councillor Walker.
I've got a question, not so much about making savings, but about improving revenue and especially customer experience. My understanding is that it's customer experience and satisfaction and what you deliver on that generates the uptake and revenue. So you mentioned earlier that your members have done quite a bit of creative thinking, problem solving. Is your gut view that there's the opportunity to really run these centres better, especially if the staff and maybe enhanced management could do that? And I guess the context around that from my perspective is I haven't had any information on what market share we've got, really no information around marketing, what our placement is around price and product and so on. But I'm making the assumption that you and your members have. So what's your response around that? Thanks.
I would say it's more than a gut feeling. I just know from past practice and experience working in Auckland Council in other areas where we've had a problem. There's a manager kind of sees there's an issue, whether it's financial, operational, strategic, whatever, and they actually sit down with staff and actually give them the opportunity to feedback and workshop it. Now, the outcome from that may be something that, on the face of it, looks harmful or disadvantageous, but at least they've been given that opportunity to be engaged, right? So it could very well be an option where, after doing this exercise, we look at maybe we need to move to a different model of direct council management, but something like a standalone business unit, or turn them into a CCO. There are obviously some advantages to that. But the critical step there for me is that's been missed. And look, we weren't able to get around all the sites. We got probably only half, 2/3 of the membership. And across a group that's 800 people strong, I think I would be very surprised and shocked if you couldn't get a centre manager and their team to start thinking of some really interesting and thoughtful ideas to increase revenue, if need be, because as I said, not all sites necessarily at that critical juncture. B, how to get more customers to the door. We'll see how can we make those sites hum so they hit some of those savings targets.
And my related question is, given that council's in the business of customer satisfaction, that's what we have to deliver on, and arguably the customer should be everything. It isn't right now, but let's say that's where we're at. If we've got leisure and pool centres that are high performers, that are delivering substantially on customer satisfaction, that's going to rub off on council and our performance as a whole, correct? Okay, thanks.
Okay, that's everybody. Thanks very much for your presentation. And we're happy to hear from staff members. I think at the moment that we're going to recommend that we receive the public input, and that's been moved by Councillor Fletcher, and I think was Councillor, who's seconding that? Ferry. All those please in favour, please say aye. On the contrary, carried. Thank you very much for presenting. Rightio. We're now moving to the highly contentious summary of... Oh, sure, sorry about that. Item 11 itself now.